Hello! Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Good morning.
Hi, how's it going? I should just apologise for the accent first up. I am English. You do get used to it after a while. um, so yeah, I can kind of hear you guys, but not very well. Oh, now I can't hear you at all.
Okay, we're here. Can you still hear us?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm going to make a quick introduction, and then I'll set the microphone down so you can talk to us. And then toward the end of our time together, I'll let some students here give you some questions that they'd like to ask.
Fantastic. That sounds great.
So you're speaking to about 100 students here today who are gathered, and then we're also streaming this throughout the school so that people can see it in their classrooms as well. We have a lot of fans here who are big readers of your book and are anxious to get to hear from you and ask some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk, and then they'll be back later on to ask some questions.
Fantastic. So I was going to talk for about half an hour or so. Does that suit you?
Sounds perfect.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, yeah, hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure.
If I can interrupt one more thing. Can you see us?
Yep, I can see you. You've just come up on the screen just now, so yep, I can see you.
Okay,
perfect.
We're still waiting for your picture to load, but we can hear you, so we'll let you go ahead
hang
and
on.
start.
Let me see. This is all yeah, hang on. Hang on. I know what to do. This is my amazing technological abilities. Is it? Oh, give it a second. This is the wonders of technology. It will come up in a minute, I think. I've had this problem before. But I'll start talking anyway.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And yeah, so anyway, yeah, it's fantastic to be talking to you guys today. It's a real pleasure to be here virtually, if nothing else. I just want to kind of introduce myself and start off by introducing myself. My name, my full name is Alexander Gordon Smith, but don't call me Alex, call me Gordon. The reason for that is that my parents wanted to call me Gordon Alexander Smith, but they knew that if they did that, my initials would spell gas. And they thought, we can't do that, that's just cruel, because then his nickname at school will be Gassy Gordon. So in the end, they decided to switch my first two names around and call me kind of, Alexander Gordon Smith. But they gave me my middle name, Gordon, which is really annoying, as I have to introduce myself like this everywhere I go. And it was totally pointless in the end, because my nickname at school turned out to be Gassy Gordon anyway. Different reasons. So anyway, do call me Gordon rather than Alex. Hang on, I am a bit worried about this video thing now. I'm wondering if if you call again. I'm not sure if that might solve the problem. Rather than that might solve the problem then.
Okay, we'll give that a shot. We'll try calling again.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, but hopefully it'll work this time. It's giving me a little weird icon, but I've not got a very pretty face anyway, so you're not missing anything. But anyway, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We're still here.
Cool, excellent. Well, I'll talk, and hopefully it'll sort itself out. So anyway, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about the books that I write, and the kind of things that I've been into, and why I'm a writer, and why I love writing so much. I'll start at the beginning, really. I mean, I've always wanted to be a horror writer ever since I was a kid. Really, always wanted to write scary books. I don't know why. I mean, I think I used to love horror when I was little. But I actually wrote my first book when I was 6 years old, and this book was called The Little Book of Monsters. Unfortunately, I do have it with me here today, but sadly, obviously, I can't show it to you today as the video isn't working. But it's called The Little Book of Monsters, and it's full of kind of weird, scary monsters. And I wrote this book when I was 6 years old, and I kind of use this just to prove to you, really, that I've always wanted to be a horror writer, because it doesn't even have a story. It's not very good, to be honest. It doesn't have a story. It's just pictures of monsters and their names, including things like the burp and the slurp, the pood and the nude, and The Gloop and the Ploop. Now, the reason I tell people about this is because when I was 6 years old, I kind of wanted I kind of wrote this book. I don't actually remember writing this book, but I remember kind of shortly afterwards, 6 years old, thinking to myself, I've just written a scary book. Now, this book isn't scary at all, but at the time I thought it was a scary book, and I thought I kind of want to show this book to my mum and my dad. But I thought if I show this book to my parents, they might start screaming, they might start crying, they might throw me out of the house. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Apparently, one day I kind of gathered up the courage to go and show this book to my parents, and mum, I showed it to my mum. My mum opened it up, but I was kind of waiting for the screams. I wanted some kind of reaction, and she opened up, and all I got was kind of a, oh look, that one's got long arms, and oh look, that one's got a smiley face. Admittedly, giving them smiley faces was a major flaw in my plan for writing a scary book. And I remember being quite disappointed, and I kind of went, no, Mum, no, it's a scary book. And I stormed out of the room, didn't speak to her again till tea time. So, I remember being quite disappointed by that experience, that, I hadn't actually managed to write a scary book. So that was my first experience, just to prove to you guys, really, that I've always wanted to be just a horror writer, to write scary stories. I was about 6 years old when I had my first experience of genuine horror as well. I don't mean like a tragedy or something. I mean like genre horror. When I was 6 years old, I used to go and stay with my gran up in Scotland. My gran was this lovely little round old lady that worked in a newsagent's, which is, I guess you guys would call it like a grocery store, or it's a place where you could buy everything, really. Just a kind of small store, and it was, you could also rent video cassettes from this store, long before you got DVDs. And I must have made the mistake of telling my gran that I liked horror. Now, by horror, obviously, I was 6 years old, so by horror, I meant The Little Book of Monsters and Scooby-Doo. For me, when I was kind of 6 years old, Scooby-Doo was horror. That was for me, was because it had monsters and ghosts and things in it. So I must have made the mistake of telling my gran that I liked horror. She got completely the wrong idea. She came home from work one day. It was just me and her in the house. She came home from work one day with a stack of R-rated videos. Now, these were things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, zombie flesh rippers, all these kind of video nasties from the 1970s. And, I was 6 years old, and, I kind of, remember thinking to myself, well, I've never seen a proper horror film before, so this could be quite exciting. And she put the first one on, and all there was blood and brains flying everywhere and guts going everywhere. Me, just 6 years old, going, no, just absolutely terrified about everything that I was seeing on screen. And I remember, I was terrified, obviously, but I remember I didn't want to hurt my gran's feelings, because I didn't want to ask her to turn it off, because I didn't want to upset her. And so I remember trying to stare at the wall above the television, thinking it looks like I'm looking at the television, but I'm not really paying any attention to what's going on. But my gran, she was sitting right next to me. She kept nudging me, going, "Oh look, she's eating his eyeballs! Oh look, he's just ripped out his brain!" Things like that, and forcing me to watch everything that was on the telly. And I remember, that night lying in bed at my gran's house, just thinking, I'm going to die, they're going to kill me. And, my gran, she must have sensed that I was still awake, because she came blundering into my room, nothing on but a nightie, no teeth in, going, "Oh, okay." And I remember just thinking, "Zombie!" falling out of bed. I ran into a wall, and that's all I remember about that particular event in my childhood. So that was the first time I'd experienced genuine horror. There's something that was absolutely really, really scary. And I remember kind of just that kind of, for a little while after that, I couldn't even watch Scooby-Doo without bursting into floods of tears. It almost scarred me for life. But I think in the long run, that experience desensitized me to horror. It made me realize that, if I can watch zombie flesh rippers when I'm 6 years old, I can do anything. So by the time I was kind of about 11 years old, that's when I really decided that I was going to be a horror author. I was going to write scary stories. I didn't just want to be the kind of author that you know, thought of ideas and then wrote them down. I wanted to be a different kind of author. I want to be the kind of author that went out and had genuine scary experiences. Like I wanted to go and visit haunted houses or find ghosts and monsters and then write stories about those experiences. And you know, my reasoning was that if I wrote stories based on genuine experiences, they would be the scariest stories ever written because they'd be based on real things. You know, I wanted to be kind of more like a paranormal detective that then went on to write about scary stories. So I was about 11 years old at this point, and I live in a place called Norwich. Norwich is 2 hours outside of London. It's a very, very old city. It's a medieval city. We've got a kind of castle and a cathedral that are both about 1,000 years old, and a lot of scary buildings in Norwich. And 11 years old, where I lived when I was 11 years old, we were quite close to the outskirts of the city, and a short cycle ride out of the city took you to this kind of house. Now, this house was a typical kind of country home, you know, pretty big, not quite a mansion, but pretty big. This one in particular had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. All the windows were boarded up, all the grounds were overgrown. Everyone told stories about how witches used to live in this house, or how somebody had died in this house, you know, and their ghosts still remained. We always used to tell stories about this house at school, about how it was haunted. So we all knew it was haunted, but nobody really knew the exact truth about why. And I thought to myself, this is the perfect place to find a ghost and write the scariest story ever written. So I did a very stupid thing. I decided that what I was going to do is I was going to spend a night inside this haunted house. Now, I didn't want to do this by myself. So I didn't want to do it by, obviously didn't want to do this by myself. So I managed to convince my best friend Nigel to come along with me. Now, Nigel was my age as well. We did a very stupid thing. I told my mum I was staying at Nigel's house. Nigel told his mum he was staying at my house, and we met just down the road from me, after dark. All we had was one flashlight. That was all we had. And we cycled out to this great big abandoned house in the countryside. And I remember we parked our bikes, we climbed over the fence, we hacked our way through the gardens. This house was all boarded up, but luckily the boards were all rotten, so we managed to pull one off the window and climb inside. We weren't even thinking about how dangerous this was. So we climbed inside and we started to walk through this house. Now, I remember, you know, there was nothing in there but rot and rats. You could hear the rats running around in the walls. You could smell them. It was a horrible, horrible place. And we started to walk through this house. And I'll never forget this. After a while, we started to hear a noise, and it was just coming out of the walls, and it was just going tick, 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 tick. And I remember thinking to myself, that sounds like a clock, like one of those big old-fashioned grandfather clocks. And I remember thinking, how can there be a clock in this house? Who is going to be here to wind up a clock or put batteries in a clock? And I was scared, you know, but I thought, this is my job now. I've got to find something scary and write the scariest story ever written. So we carried on walking through this house, and we found a great big room, huge, great big kind of ballroom or dining room or something. Walked inside and thought, we'll just spend the rest of the night in here. But after a couple of minutes, we started to hear the same noise again, and it doubled up, and it was just going. And I freaked. I thought, this house has a pulse. This house has a heartbeat. This house is coming to life around us. This house is going to eat us. And I screamed and I ran out of the room. Now, as soon as I'd run out of the room, I heard Nigel shrieking behind me. This was the noise of somebody who's being eaten alive, the noise of somebody who is dying. And I was running down the corridor of this house, running away from it, running down thinking, they've got Nigel, they've got Nigel. And I was actually shouting back, you can have Nigel, you can have Nigel, just let me go, running down this corridor. And a great friend I am. It took me, I couldn't find a way out because I was so scared, I was so panicked. Eventually I found the window that we'd come in through. I threw myself out of that window and started running through the garden. Now, to my eternal shame, and I didn't even know this was physically possible until I was that age. I was so scared that as I was running, I was throwing up all over myself, just going blah, blah, macaroni cheese all over me. Eventually, I reached the fence. I threw myself over the fence. There was a road. There was a light. I've never been so relieved in all my life. A few minutes afterwards, Nigel came screaming across the garden. What I hadn't realised back in the house is that he'd started screaming basically because I just run off and left him in the dark because I was holding the flashlight. Because I didn't think of that at the time. I just thought he was being eaten, so I was running even faster. Oh, just disaster. So anyway, he threw himself over the fence, and we stood there at the side of the road for a few minutes, just crying, and I kind of, I was so disappointed because I thought, not only am I not brave enough to spend a night in a haunted house, I'm not even as brave as Nigel, because Nigel hadn't thrown up, and I was really disappointed about that. And I honestly thought that for a few minutes until we started walking back to our bikes, and Nigel confessed that he'd been so scared that he'd peed himself. So I remember thinking, yay, I'm slightly braver than Nigel. But all in all, that experience was a pretty bad one. But it taught me two very important things. The first is that I wasn't quite brave enough at that point to spend a night inside a haunted house. The second, much more important thing was that I realized that this is what writing is. For me, writing isn't about sitting down and writing a story about a haunted house. Writing is about going into a haunted house, getting terrified. Even if you don't find a ghost, that experience was terrifying anyway. And then using those emotions, using that experience in your writing. And it's been like that ever since. And, a lot of people tell me that, they don't want to be a writer because it's a boring job. All you do is sit at a desk and write. And that's, for me, is the kind of opposite of writing. Obviously, there's no right or wrong way to how to write a book, and a lot of people do just sit down and write, and that's absolutely cool. But for me, writing, like I say, is about going out and traveling, meeting people, visiting haunted houses, visiting dungeons, all sorts of crazy things like that, bringing those experiences back into your writing and kind of using them in your writing. That for me is why writing is so much fun. So yeah, I've written like that ever since, really, all through school. I used to write scary stories. I remember my first ever story I wrote when I was about 13. This is the first proper story I ever wrote. We got set an assignment in English to write the scariest story that we could. And, it was our English teacher just said, go home, write 2 pages, anything you want, just as long as it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. I went home and I wrote 20 pages, double-sided. It was a novel for me at the time. It was all typewritten. It was a story about a serial killer that murdered all of my teachers. And I remember it was a very, very gruesome story. And I handed this story in to my English teacher. And about a week later, she kind of pulled me out of class. Not literally, she just took me out of class, took me into the corridor and said, Gordon, is everything all right at home? Nothing you want to talk to us about? We've got a school counsellor, if you... And I was like, no, I just like writing scary stories. And I did, all through school, I used to write scary stories. My first novel, in terms of like a proper length novel, was about, I was about 17 when I started writing it. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but when our school, the most important exams we take at our school are the ones you take right at the end of school. They're called A-levels for us. We do them when we're 17, 18, and they're what determine, whether you get into university or, what you go on to do afterwards. When I started doing my A-levels, I was actually starting to write this novel. And this novel was a really nice, gentle, relaxing piece about angels that ate people. So, it was quite gruesome, quite gory. And I was so convinced that this novel was going to make me a multi-millionaire, the next Stephen King, this next multi-millionaire author. I was so convinced about that I did something very stupid. I stopped working at school. I kept going to school, but I stopped trying, stopped putting any effort in, stopped paying attention, because I thought, I don't need it, I'm going to be rich and famous. And I actually failed my end of school exams. And I don't mean did badly, I mean failed. I fell asleep in my English exam. And, it was a terrible, terrible thing. The reason I tell this story is basically because, at the same sort of time I got my exam results back, I started to get rejections for this novel. And these rejections from publishers were things that said things like, Dear Mr. Smith, thank you for sending us your book. It's disgusting. What's wrong with you? Please never contact us again. Things like that. And I was crushed. I was absolutely devastated. And I remember thinking to myself, if I can't do it now, if I'm not successful now, then I'll never be successful. And I did the absolute worst possible thing you can ever do in life. I gave up. I stopped trying. As far as academic stuff went, I went back to school. I had to spend an extra year at school. I went on, did okay in my exams, went off to university. That worked out fine. But as far as the writing went, I gave up. I stopped trying. The reason I tell this story is because I think it's the most important thing I've ever learned in life. And I think the most important thing I could ever pass on in life is that it doesn't matter what you want to do in life. The worst thing you can do with anything is to give up. You guys are at this amazing age now where you are, you know, you can achieve anything you want to achieve in life. And I honestly believe that if you put your mind to something, you can absolutely accomplish it. Human beings are amazing that way. The only thing that's guaranteed to stop you getting there is if you give up, if you stop trying, if you let people tell you that you can't do it. So never give up. Doesn't matter what you want to do in life, never give up. But no one was there to tell me that, and I did actually stop writing for a little while. For about 6 years, actually, I didn't write anything because I just thought I couldn't do it. And it was only really a few years later that I started writing again. And the reason I started writing again is actually another book that I wrote with my little brother, but we haven't got time to talk about that today, sadly, because I want to tell you really a little bit about where the idea for Furnace came from, because that's the book you're most familiar with. I'm kind of wondering if maybe if I quit out, I've never had this problem with the camera before. Maybe if I quit out of Skype and then give you guys a call back, the camera might work. Should we try that? Just because I'd hate for you not to see my face, because that would obviously be the highlight of your day or your year, really. I mean, I don't know.
That sounds good. If you want to try that, sure.
Cool. I'll just give it a quick go. If not, we'll surrender it to and we'll just talk. But I'll give it a quick go. Hang on a sec.
Okay, my tech guy's asking if you'll go ahead and close everything and then call us back.
Cool. I will do. I'll do
Great.
that right
Thank
now.
you.
What's his friend's name? Nigel.
Nigel. If you were named Nigel here, you'd get made fun of all the time.
I love Nigel. That is awesome.
And then the whole gassy Gordon thing. That's good.
Hey,
We can
you
see
me
you.
now?
All right.
That's more like
Excellent.
it. Excellent. All right, sorry about that. It was obviously something I was doing wrong. So brilliant. All right, can you hear me? Yeah, already good to go. Excellent. Okay, that's much better. Obviously, you don't want to miss this. This is just amazing. So yeah, where I was, Furnace. Now, I can show you my little book now as well. The little book of monsters. There we go. Just obviously a masterpiece. I'll show you my favourite monster from it as well, the Ploop. There we go. That's how good I used to be. So anyway, Furnace. This book, Furnace. I want to tell you a little bit about this. The idea for Furnace really came from when I was a teenager. Now, when I was a teenager, I kind of went off the rails a little bit. I fell in with a really bad crowd, a bit of a gang, and it was a biker gang, and I used to get in a lot of trouble. I started stealing things from my house. I started stealing things from my school just to kind of keep this kind of thing going, and started to get in a lot of trouble. And one night I got into a really bad fight, and actually, got some teeth knocked out. It was a really bad experience. And my mum kind of pulled me aside one night and said to me, it's your life. It's up to you what you do with your life. But if you carry on like this, you're going to end up dead or in prison. And obviously, I didn't want that. And I hated that. I hated that kind of thing in my life. I hated being that person. So I was always looking for a way to get out of it. And this was my chance. So I kind of went back to school. I went back to writing. Everything worked out absolutely fine. But I was always left with this question. And that question was basically, what would have happened to me if I'd carried on down that path, if I'd maybe got in trouble, serious trouble, if I started breaking into houses, if somebody I knew had died and I got accused of their murder. And, years and years later, when I was looking for a story to write, I kind of asked myself, and the two most important words in writing, if you're ever looking for ideas, these are the only two words you ever need. What if? What if this happens? Seriously, you can come up with ideas everywhere. I asked myself, what if? When I was a teenager, I'd been accused of murder and sent to the world's worst prison, and that's where the idea for Furnace came from. So you see, that's why he's called Alex. We're both called Alex, although I go by Gordon because we're the same person but different as well. He's a lot cooler than I am. So anyway, that's where the idea for Furnace came from. When we were writing Furnace, I kind of, I wanted to. It was actually my little brother Jamie. My little brother Jamie was about. He's a good few. He's 16 years younger than me. So when he was about 11, when I was writing Furnace, he came up to me one day and he said, "Look, you're writing a book about prisons. have you ever been to a prison? And I said, to be honest, Jamie, no, I've never been to a prison. And he said, well, don't you think it's a good idea to go and visit a prison, get a sense of what a prison is like? And actually, it was a really good piece of advice, and a great piece of advice for the writers amongst you. If you're writing about a location and you can visit it safely, go and visit it. It's a really good way of kind of getting to grips of the story. A lot of what you do as a writer is trying to get inside the world of the story, try and work out, who your characters are, what their world is like. Anything you can do to make that story real is worth doing. So anyway, like I said, Norwich is a very, very old city. A lot of them underneath the city is a network of tunnels and vaults and plague pits and dungeons, proper dungeons. Nobody goes down there anymore. It's not a tourist attraction. It's just a horrible place. There's one building in particular called the Guildhall, which is a very, very old building, like 500-600 years old. And underneath it are the dungeons. And Jamie and I got permission to go and visit these dungeons. So we went down there one day. And if you imagine it, it's all down beneath the ground. There's no windows down there, hardly any lights in there. All this horrible claustrophobic ancient place, and the cells are tiny. They're not much bigger than this little box that I'm in here. You can't lie down in them. They're stone walls, dark stone walls, no windows, and the doors, they don't even have bars on. They're solid oak doors about this thick, covered in graffiti from hundreds of years ago. So Jamie and I got permission to go down there, and I was scared. I thought this place used to be a prison. There are going to be ghosts in here. But I thought Jamie was scared too, because Jamie just said, go into a cell, 5 seconds, and then we'll go. And I thought, 5 seconds, I can do that. So I went into the nearest cell. Wall, ceiling, floor, atmosphere. Okay, I know what it's like. I turned around to go, and all I saw was this huge wooden door swinging shut, and my little brother's face on the other side going, crunch. Door closed, and that was it. I was locked in. Now, originally, the doors would have had keys, great big keys, but the keys were long gone, but it still had a latch, and the latch went over, and I was locked in. Now, I knew that cell was empty, but I thought, any minute now, I'm going to hear a voice in my ear going, I've got you now. Or I'll feel a hand on my shoulder pulling me back into the darkness. And I thought, Jamie's going to open this door in a minute, and I'm not going to be here anymore. So I was freaking out, and I was banging on the door going, Jamie, let me out, Jamie, let me out. All I could hear from the other side of the door was, no, please, Jamie, let me out, I'm really scared. Beg, I'm on my knees, Jamie. 15 minutes later. Now, I know 15 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but I can assure you, when you're stuck in a place like that, when you can feel the spiders all over you and you think they're ghost fingers, every single second feels like an eternity. 15 minutes later, Jamie opened the door and I shot out of that cell and up the stairs into the sunshine. Best feeling ever. Managed not to puke all over myself this time, which is always good. So once I kind of picked myself up off my knees, once I'd finished, worshipping the sunshine, once I finished crying, I wasn't really crying much. I kind of actually realised that this had been a good experience for a couple of reasons. The first is that up until that point, Furness Penitentiary, and I should have said, for those of you that haven't read Furness, it is about a guy, a teenage boy who goes to, he gets sent to life without parole in the world's worst prison, which is underground, and this place is kind of full of monsters. And, up until that point, when I was writing the book, I kind of pictured Furness as the kind of prison you get anywhere in the world. Obviously not a paradise, but it's above the ground. You've got a bit of light, a bit of air. After that, I knew for a fact that I wanted Furness to be more like a medieval dungeon, buried a mile beneath the ground. If you had, it's entombed in rock and concrete and, in this kind of natural fault line in the earth. If you had 1,000 years to tunnel your way out of Furness, you wouldn't get anywhere. And that all came from that experience. The other reason that experience was good, even though it was terrifying at the time, is that, when I was writing about Alex's first night in prison, Alex gets, a life without parole. We can't actually get that sentence here in England. Our life sentence is 30 years. That's it, but, obviously, I think, in a lot of parts of America, obviously, you can get life without parole. That's what Alex gets. He knows he will never see the sun again. He will never see his family again. His first night in his cell, he can hear everyone crying and screaming. I had an idea about what that was like. Now, obviously, I'd only been locked away for 15 minutes, but part of me, when I was in that cell, was thinking, what if Jamie just decides he doesn't want a big brother anymore? Or what if he locked himself in a cell? Nobody was coming to look for us. Nobody was coming to check on us. So, part of me, when I was down there, was thinking, I am going to die in here. So I used those experiences, used those emotions. And again, like I say to you, if you're a writer, and I'm sure a lot of you are writers, if you can get inside the heads of your characters, work out what they're experiencing for real, try and make that story real in your own life. It's a really, really good experience. Obviously, always be safe and always be sensible if you're going places or doing anything, but try and get inside the story that way. So I've got 3 more stories to tell, and I'm glad the camera's working for the next one, because I've got something to show you guys. Now, if there's writers amongst you, and like I say, I'm sure there are writers amongst you, have any of you ever had that thing where you've got a story in your head, you've got an image in your head, you know what you want to say, but you cannot find the words to say it? Has anyone ever had that experience? I'm sure a lot of you have had that experience. Every single writer in the world sometimes, has a story they want to tell, cannot find the words. Doesn't matter if you've written 100 books. So it happens to everyone. The best thing to do, but the worst thing to do, is to carry on writing. Don't ever try and force it. I think your brain is basically looking for a way into the story that it hasn't found yet. So the best thing is to take a break from the writing and draw a picture, cut some pictures out of a magazine, take some photographs, and draw a map, anything that's related to the world of the story that isn't actually writing. Because then when you go back to the writing, you should usually find that that your brain's found a way to tell that story. It works for me anyway, so give it a go if you're ever stuck. After the prison incident, I was looking for a way to get my revenge on Jamie. I was really angry at Jamie for locking me in that prison cell, even though it had kind of been quite good in the end. So what I did in the end, the way I've worked out to do it is by this. When I was writing Furnace, there are creatures in Furnace called Weisers. Now, I'm sure some of you know what the Weisers are. For those of you that don't, they're kind of twisted figures with gas masks stitched into their faces. They're kind of bald heads and kind of piggy eyes. They're almost a bit like zombies, but they're very fast and they're very clever as well. So, and I was trying to write these things. I knew what I wanted them to be, but I couldn't find the words, and I was getting really frustrated. So I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to make a life-size Weiser. And I did. And I do have him with me here today. And a quick word of warning here that I actually, I'm sure none of you will be scared by this, especially as, you're looking at it on a screen. But I took this to a school once in England, and a 13 or 14, I can't remember exactly how old he was, but a 13-year-old boy fainted in the middle of his class when I pulled this out of the bag, which was hilarious. Not for him, just for me. So don't be alarmed. But I put various bits and pieces together and ended up with this. So this is a Weiser. This is it's a real gas mask, and it's all painted and everything. Or if anyone's wondering, kind of what they look like, they're all different. But this one under its mask looks like this. So this was really, really useful for a couple of reasons. The first is that up until this point, I didn't really know what a Weiser was like. So this really helped me kind of visualize it, and also it helped me kind of get inside Alex's head. The first time he sees one of these is the night he's framed for murder. So it helped me kind of work out what he thinks when he sees this thing, what's running through his head, what his thoughts are. It was really useful. The other reason is that I thought, now I know how to get revenge on my little brother. So one night I took this round. He lives 3 doors down the road from me, 3 houses down the road from me, with my mum and my stepdad and my other little brother. And the only one who was still awake was my stepdad. And I said, is it all right if I put this upstairs? And he said, that's absolutely fine. So I took this. Jamie was asleep. I took this upstairs and I mounted it on a coat stand right down the corridor from Jamie's bedroom. It's quite bright, and you can tell this is just a mask, but in that corridor it's quite dark. So put a big old coat around the shoulders, a pair of boots on the floor. This looked 100% real, and I left it there. And the next morning I went back and expecting to find Jamie in tears, or scarred for life, or something cool like that. And Jamie has actually expressly forbidden me to tell anyone what happened to him that night. But luckily for me, he wasn't the only one who got scared, because apparently in the middle of the night, my mum had got up to go for a wee, as you sometimes do in the middle of the night. She'd walked out of her room and walked right into this thing. My stepdad had forgotten to mention when he went to bed that there was a 7-foot-tall gas mask wearing freak standing right outside their bedroom door. She'd walked into it, and she didn't talk to me for a little while after that, but in her own words, next time I saw her, she said she'd almost pooed herself. It was a fairly bad experience for her, but a really good experience for me. Anyway, if you're ever stuck for words, like I say, make something, do something that's related to the story that isn't actually writing. So I know I'm pushing for time a bit, and I know you've got questions to ask. So I'll tell you what, I'll just tell one more story. Yeah, I'll tell this one. It's disgusting, and I apologise for this. It also involves something I hate quite passionately, and that's guns. I think obviously guns are fine in books and films and video games, but in real life they cause a lot of death and a lot of heartbreak. And I think the world would honestly be a much better place without them. But when I was writing Furnace, I knew that you know, there were going to be guns, you know, and the prison is set in a prison. The guards would carry shotguns. I thought I owed it to myself, being a writer, to know what it was like to fire a gun. So I've got a friend called Adam. Now, obviously in England, I'm sure you know this, we're not allowed guns over here. We've got incredibly strict gun laws. The only thing you're ever allowed to own is a shotgun, a double-barreled or a single-barreled shotgun, or a 2.2 rifle. Only a very few people are allowed a 2.2 rifle, and only farmers really are allowed shotguns. The licensing laws are incredible, which is a good thing, I think. Anyway, I got a friend called Adam. He had his license. He said, if you want to know what it's like to fire a shotgun, come hunting with us one weekend, and we'll go shoot some rabbits. And I said, you know, I like the idea of the shotgun, but I don't like the idea of shooting rabbits. And he said, that's all right. We'll find something else for you to shoot. So one day I got in the car and I drove up to Durham, which is, you know, a few hours away from Norwich. And he said, right, we went out first thing in the morning, nothing for miles and miles and miles, but fields. And he said, okay, so you want to fire your shotgun? And I said, yes, please. He said, but you don't want to shoot anything living? I said, no, thank you. He said, well, the best thing to shoot with a shotgun, if you don't want to shoot anything living, is a cow poo. Now, I don't know what you guys call them. Over here, we call them cow pats. I know they're called cow pies in some parts of America. We'll call it a cow pie for today. For those of you that haven't seen one, they're kind of about this big. They're gooey in the middle. They're crusty on the top. They are very much like a pie. It's a good name for them. And and I said, what? I said, Adam, you brought me all the way up here to shoot a cow pie. This is going to be rubbish. And he said, trust me. So we went and found a great big, fresh, steaming, juicy cow pie. They're not hard to find in the middle of the countryside. And Adam said, there you go. So I'd never fired a gun before. I was a bit nervous. So I kind of aimed 3, 2, 1, pulled the trigger. I soon learned that when you shoot a cow pie with a shotgun, it erupts. It's like watching a poo volcano. It just goes like this. It would hit the ceiling in your library, and I can see how high that ceiling is. It's incredible. And I was just like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And Adam said, I told you. So for the rest of that morning, we walked around shooting cow pies. And if anyone was watching from a distance, all they'd have seen was these kind of weird eruptions. They'd be like, oh no, the world's ending. But I'll tell you this one thing that happened just to finish off, because it is, you know, it's kind of funny and disgusting at the same time. It wasn't just me and Adam up there. It was also Adam's little brother, Graham. He was 14 at the time. Now, it's quite hard for me to set the scene for you, but given what I can see in your library, the distance between the pillars is roughly the distance between me and Adam walking, and Graham was up ahead, about that kind of, you know, maybe 30 yards. I don't really do yards, but 30 yards ahead. There was also quite a strong breeze blowing over the hill in that direction. You can probably see where this is going. So Adam and I were walking along, and suddenly we found the godfather of all cow pats. This thing was huge. It was like a mountain. If a cow had done that, it was the size of your hall. Sorry, not a library, your hall. We kind of stopped and went, that thing is huge. That thing is enormous. We've got to do something special with this cow pie. We thought we can't just do the normal thing. We've got to do something special. So what we thought we'd do is we would both shoot it at the same time with both barrels. And we weren't sure how dangerous this was, so we took a few steps back, aimed, 3, 2, 1, pulled the trigger. Now, I pulled both triggers, sorry. So it was 4 lots of shot going into there instead of just one. It nearly ripped my arm out of his shoulder, but that cow pie rose like a tidal wave. It surged up into the air and started to roll across the hill. Now, the wind got under it. This was all accidental, but the wind got under it and turned it into this unstoppable tsunami of poo going right towards Graham. Graham was up ahead. The timing was perfect. You couldn't make this up. He was up ahead. He heard this almighty explosion. He turned around to see what we were shooting at in time to see this wall of poo coming right towards him. All he had time to do was, didn't have time to turn around. He didn't even have time to close his mouth before it went all over him. Now, at that point, we had, Adam's dad came storming over and he was like, you're not shooting any more cow pats, because he's Scottish. And we were like, oh, but it was worth it, because if you saw Graham after that, he was just caked in this kind of greeny, yellowy cow slurry. He even told us afterwards that he'd swallowed some, which I think is pretty disgusting. But anyway, the point of this story, and the point of all these stories really, is that, before that experience, I had no idea what it was like to shoot a gun. But afterwards, I knew the weight of a gun, the feel of the recoil, the smell of the gunpowder, even the kind of cleaning oil on the barrel. All of it was real to me. Because it's real to me, it feels real to Alex and the other characters in the book. Because it feels feels real to them. It feels real, hopefully, when you read the book. So I'm going to finish talking there, but I just want to sum up two important points, I think. The first is that, anyone can be a writer. Any one of you guys could be a writer if that's what you want to be. For those of you who maybe put off the idea of writing because you think it's just about sitting in a room writing, it doesn't have to be. For me, writing's about going out into the world, having these adventures, having these experiences, traveling, building, meeting, shooting cowpats, and bringing those experiences back into your writing. Obviously, like I say, always be safe and be sensible. But the most important thing, and this is the thing I really want to pass on to you guys, is that it doesn't matter what you want to do in life. It doesn't matter if you don't even know what you want to do in life yet. But when you find out what your passion is in life, the most important thing, the thing to always remember, is to never give up. Never give up on your dreams. Just keep going for it. Never let people tell you can't do it, and never let that bit of your brain that always tells you can't do things. Never listen to it. Just carry on with it. Keep working towards it. It might be hard work, but all the good things in life really are. So thank you. I know I've kind of sort of rattled through that. I hope you managed to catch some of it. And we do have, I'm sure, some time left for questions. So if anyone's got any questions, just fire away, and I will do my best to answer them. But you might need the microphone because oh yeah, there it is. Cool.
Hi, I'm Sean.
Hey.
What inspired you to write about a teen going to jail, and how many jails did you visit while you were?
Well, that was, the main inspiration was obviously my own life, my own kind of teenage years, but I did get into a lot of trouble. In terms of visiting jails, obviously the one I just told you, but we did actually try and get inside the main prison in Norwich, just like a prison anywhere else in the world. I won't tell you this, it's quite a long story, but I won't tell it to you now. But it was me and my little brother. He was 11 at this point, and I think he was 11 anyway. But anyway, there was a woman behind the desk, and I kid you not, she had a face like this. She was like a bulldog, and it was quite scary, and I didn't want to go in, but Jamie went right up to her and he said, "My brother's writing a book about prisons, and we wanted to come in and have a look around." To cut a long story short, there was no way they were going to let us in that prison, even though he was quite persistent. I think towards the end she was actually going to call to have us arrested, so we did make a speedy exit. So that was a bit of a failure, but again, it was a good experience. They're quite intimidating places, prisons, and we got that from being there. So. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Noah.
Hey.
How much research did you do for your book?
Well, this is again kind of hopefully I've told you some of the stories that we did. I think like I said, the most important thing you can do is just to get inside that world of your story. If that's how you write, you might not write like this, but for me, getting inside the story is the single most important thing you can do, because if you know what it's like to be your characters, you are those characters. When it comes to writing the book, you become those characters. You can write as they were. I'll tell you another quick story about research. The book that I wrote with my little brother, the one that kind of got me back into writing, was called The Inventors, and it was about two inventors who have to save the world from an evil genius. And we did actually try and build a lot of inventions, and we did actually, the main one is that we tried to build some rocket boots, and we did end up using gunpowder for those rocket boots. The original plan was that my brother was 9 at this point. He wanted me to wear the rocket boots, so that he could send me up into space or whatever. And I told him I was no way I was prepared to do that. So we made some rocket boots for a model. I don't know if any of you know Ric Flair, the wrestler, and we actually made him some rocket boots, and we tried them out in the garden using gunpowder powered rocket boots. That's quite hard to say, gunpowder powered. But anyway, again, to cut a long story short, this is what happened to Ric Flair when we tried out his rocket boots. So very, very relieved that it wasn't me wearing those boots. But again, we knew what it was like to be those inventors and to build things and make things. So the book became our life. It made it a lot easier to write. So again, that's the kind of research that I do for the books. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ian.
Hi.
My question is, did you know the outcome of the series all along, or did you figure it out as the series progressed?
A good question. No, I didn't know. I had no idea where the series was going. And that was kind of deliberate. What I do, like I said, is I do a lot of research about the world of the story, and about things that you'll find in the story, locations and atmospheres and kind of weapons and things like that. But I don't like to know what's going to happen in the story before the characters do. Some people, and like, there's no wrong way to write a book. Some people plan every single chapter, everything that happens throughout the book, and that's cool. That works for some people. But for me, that feels a bit like cheating. You know, if you know what's going to happen, your characters are going to know what's going to happen, and you know, if they know they're going to live to the end of the story, they might not react in the same way as if they don't know. So Alex, I had no idea what was going to happen. When I started writing Lockdown, I had no idea, you know, how or if they were going to escape at all. In fact, I was getting, you know, towards the middle of the book and thinking, you know, I'm enjoying writing this, but I cannot for the life of me think of a way for them to escape from this prison. But I think because I was thinking about it so much, Alex was thinking about it so much, and when we did actually kind of think of that you know, plan, which for those of you who, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but the plan that they come up with in the book actually came to me like it came to Alex, like bing, just this moment of kind of inspiration. And I think because of that, it feels hopefully a bit more realistic. Obviously, the danger with that, and for those of you that have read the whole series, I mean, I had no idea about anything that was going to happen in the 5th book. All of that stuff, I didn't even know, you know, who the warden was or why things were weird or what the nectar was. Luckily, it all kind of came together. The danger was it might not have done. I might have had no idea how to wrap it up, but I like to write like that. For me, if you write like that, it feels like an adventure. It feels like, you know, you could just take it anywhere, and it's good. It's good fun. So yeah, no idea. Thank you.
How are we doing today?
Hey, good. Thanks, man. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, sir. I'm Ben. And my question is, what message did you want to send to the readers of Lockdown series?
That's a good question too. What message? Well, I think, you know, I never write a book with a message. You know, I think it's a wrong way to go about it. Some authors, they kind of think, well, you know, I want to send a positive message to teenagers about crime. So I'm going to write a book about someone who gets sent to prison and learns the error of his ways. I never set out to write a book like that. For me, the only thing I wanted to do is write the scariest, kind of most action-packed series that I could. But you know, I think. And you know, the truth is that Alex, when he's outside, is a thief. He's a burglar. After he gets sent to Furnace, the things he has to do to stay alive are far worse, I think, than the things he ever has to do on the outside. So you know, but I think the thing I learned when I was writing Furnace is that I think the most important thing in the world is hope. You know, and I honestly believe this. I think if you know that however bad things are, that they're going to get better, or that there's always a way out, or that you've got what it takes to survive. I think that's the most important lesson anyone could learn, because we all have times when things are bad, when we think, you know, we're never going to get out of this, life's never going to change. But I think, you know, for me, I was in quite a bad place when I started writing Furnace. You know, bad things were happening. I think we'd had a death in the family, and I kind of knew that if Alex didn't get out of Furnace, then I'd kind of never get through this period of my life. So that's what the book taught me anyway. That, you know, however bad things are, they can get better, and you know, you've got what it takes to accomplish anything or survive anything. So that's the message I think it taught me, and that's hopefully the message that, you know, I'd like to pass on. That, you know, however bad things are, you've got what it takes. You know, you can get through it. And I think hope is the single most important thing in the world. For anyone who's read the epilogue of the Furnace series and the 5th book, you know, that's my message really. You know, once I finished writing the series, that's what I wanted to say. And you know, it gets summed up in that epilogue. So yeah, I guess that's what the message would be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
My name is Micah.
Hey.
My question was, how did you come up with each character's personality?
That's a good question as well. It's a really tricky one, actually. You know, Alex, obviously, he was so close to me. He was based on me, so he had elements of my own personality. I guess the other characters, they just grew out of people I knew, and people I'd known back when I was a teenager. None of them are based specifically on any one person. I think they just grew out of other people. I would say one of the most important things you can do as a writer is to get to know your characters. What I tend to do before I start writing is if I've got an idea of who the character is going to be, I will sit them down in my head and I will ask them questions. It sounds really weird, but you know, you ask them what their favorite food is, what their worst experience has been, what their relationship is like with their parents, who their friends are, and write down the answers. It's almost like you're interviewing someone. If you do that, you get a sense of who the character is and why they do the things they do. there's an amazing questionnaire written by the author Proust, or Proust, however it's pronounced, about, and it's things like how would you die if you had a choice, or who is your hero? If you sit down and ask your character questions out of there, they come to life in your head because they've been forced to kind of tell you a little bit about themselves. So I think I did that before I started with all the main characters, kind of, Alex and Z and Donovan, and Simon as well, and just kind of got to know them a little bit, and they grow out of that experience. Z and his documentaries was my favorite thing about Furness. He always going on about the documentaries that he watches, and that all came from asking him questions before I started writing. So it's worth doing. If you're a writer, get to know your characters before you start writing. And the weird thing is, if you know your characters, if you know everything there is to know about them, they will write the story for you. When I was writing Furnace, I'd have a rough idea maybe what was going to happen in that chapter, and Alex would be in my head going, "Are you crazy? Don't do that. That will get me killed. I'm going to do this." And he'd kind of be running off and doing things. And as a writer, I'd just be typing away trying to keep up with him. It's a really weird experience. So get to know your characters. It's really important. So yeah, I think that's where they came from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan.
Oh yeah.
My question is there anything that you would change about any of the books, or anything that you would do differently in the stories?
Yeah. Well, that's a tricky one. Is there anything I'd change? Probably. In terms of the writing, there's definitely things I would change. Every time you write a book, hopefully you get a little bit better. And I look back at some of the writing in Fairness, and I think, I could have written that a lot better. And some of it's quite clumsy. But I think in terms of the story, I think because I wrote it quite organically, because everything happened quite naturally, there's nothing I could have changed. There's obviously, for those of you that read the second book right to the end, you'll know that there's one big event that if I could change anything in the series, I would change that. Somebody's death. Because, that's kind of, that I really did feel like I'd lost a friend there. In fact, more than that, I felt like I'd killed a friend. So that's one thing I would change. But to be honest, if I went back and changed that, the whole series would be different. Alex would be different. Nothing would have been the same. It would have been a completely different set of books, and it might not have worked. So I think the answer to that is like writing is like life. Sometimes you want to go back and change things, but if you go back and change things, you never know where you'd be now. You might be in a much worse position now. So I think that temptation to go back and change things, you should always ignore it. However things happened in your life or in your writing, that's what makes the present what it is, whether that's good or bad. It's what makes you what you are. So I think I think really I wouldn't change anything in the series apart from maybe the quality of the writing, but no, I think so anyway. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, unfortunately that bell means that we've got to let our students head off to their next class.
Sorry.
But there was one last question I'll ask on behalf of a student before I let them go. He wanted to know if there are any plans for movie versions of the Furnace series.
Well, yeah, hopefully. I mean, this is the thing I've wanted right from the start, is a movie version of the Furnace series. Because I just think it would be amazing. Just because they probably would tell the story completely differently, but I think as long as they kept the heart of the books, I think it would be a great story. It's a tricky one because the rights have been bought by a film company, but even though someone buys the rights, what they do is they buy them for a very small amount of money for a very short amount of time, and that gives them the right to make a movie. So someone is in the process now of trying to make a movie, but they've still got to raise, $10 million or however much, and they've still got to get everything together. So it might not happen. The short answer is, who knows? But keep your fingers crossed, because I honestly think it would be the most amazing thing ever. I'll just say before I go that if anyone is interested in asking any more questions that you haven't had a chance to today, my Facebook page is Lockdown. If any of you are on Facebook, you can contact me on there. And I do a lot of regular giveaways. I think it's just facebook.com/Alexander Gordon Smith, or my website is alexandergordonsmith.com. You can contact me through there as well. So feel free to give me a shout if you've got any more questions that we didn't have time for today. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you all today. And thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. We really have a lot of fans who enjoy your books here, so we appreciate your time today.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.
Not the whole series, I hope. It's just the first one, okay?